in front of you. And they have lots of lines and they look a little confusing. But we're going to start with the one that says filing fees by case type collected by the clerk on the top of the first page. So not the one with all the lines on it. And these two handouts really kind of work together, and I want you to understand it, but I also want you to take it in with you. Make sure that whoever's doing your bookkeeping has this. We hand these out every time that we have a clerk's conference, and then there's other times we'll have to email it out in between. If there's a January change, you might get a January you might get a December email that has this for effective January 1. Usually the changes in the fees and costs are effective either July 1 or January 1. And this past year we did not have any that were effective in 2014 from that legislation. So we were lucky, we dodged a bullet. So you really have the July 1st, 2013 fees in your hand, but it is the most recent one. And what this is just what it says. These are the costs and fees applicable to the various case types. Now there's lots of case types that Jeff has on his quick reference that are incorporated into criminal, and lots of case types that are civil, and lots of case types that are some kind of probate case. And so you have to still use the quick reference to get the right code to put in your computer system for the actual case type. But in general, this is what the statute says. It breaks it down into just the criminal, the civil, the juvenile, small claims, probate, and infraction and ordinance violations. So those are the kinds, that's how we have classified the fees. Now, when you look at this, you have a bunch of numbers down the left-hand side. That's a line number for the next handout, so we'll disregard that for now. You have the fees name. You have a reference number. That's an Indiana code reference of where you will find the authority for this fee. And then you have either a dollar amount or some kind of a footnote to look down at the bottom to see whether it applies to all criminal cases, just some criminal cases, just in some instances, and so on. So, for instance, let's just take the first line is court costs. That's a basic court cost. That's what we went back to in the mid-'80s when we had unified court costs. And now we are up over 60 different fees, including court costs. So it's about time for them to come back and unify them once again and have just one court cost and then have a formula to divvy it up. But they haven't done that, and I don't see that they're putting any legislation like that together right at the moment. So we're stuck with having to know a voluminous number of costs and fees and when to charge them and where they all go. It can be very overwhelming. Go back and thank your bookkeeper. And if you are the bookkeeper, you have a lot to learn. It is a lot to keep up with, but once you get it, you'll have it. And then you just have to learn the changes. So hopefully these handouts will help you to be a reference for that. Your computer systems obviously are going to do a lot of this for you, but you must remember that when new fees came in, they had to put that fee into the program correctly so that it was collected on the right case types and so that it goes the right place in your distributions after you've collected the money. If they didn't program it right, you're not going to do it right relying on that computer system. So you have to check things. Not all the time, but you do have to check things. So that's why we're giving you this. You can see that there's an IC reference, Indiana Code 33-37-4-1 is what gives us the basic court costs for a criminal case type. It's $120 out to the right. If you look at the next one on the marijuana eradication program fee, it has a code reference and then it has an asterisk. And that asterisk, if you look down to the bottom footnote, says that the judge determines if this fee is to be collected and also determines the amount of the fee. Most of these types of fees that are determined by a judge usually have a range within the statute that the judge can order. And a lot of that information is in your clerk's manual. So you'll get these handouts in the clerk's manual, which you'll be switching all the time. And then you'll also get a description, a more in-depth, detailed description of each one of these fees that, from the statute. So you can either go directly to the statute, you can look in the manual. And you find those manuals on our website, which I know Debbie gave you earlier. So if you come down to the bottom, the total criminal filing fee says it's $168. And then it has a little number 3. So if we look at footnote number 3, the total is $181 if you are collecting the sheriff's service of process fee of $13. So in almost all counties, I think mine is the exception, which is Marion. And in Marion County, the sheriff collects that themselves. But in all of the other counties, I think you will find the clerk collects the sheriff's service of process fee. The reason for that is that fee is to be collected one time per case. And sheriffs don't have a case management system. So they don't know if it's been collected before on that case or not on that case. They might be serving process for a case that's in another county. But wherever the case is filed, that county clerk will collect the fee, even if there's some papers that have to be served in another county. And the sheriffs kind of have agreed that that's the way that they will operate. Okay, so it's just one time per case if they want service by the sheriff. If they're doing service by public notice, they don't have to pay the fee. Let's go on and look at the next page, or the back of that page. That is for the civil cases, all the civil case types. Those are the fees that you will charge. We have the same thing on the next page for the juvenile cases and the small claims. And as we go through these, you can see like number 14 is always associated with court costs. It seems to be in all these different case types. So that sort of gets us to, you know, as we look down through the probate and the infraction, we still got number 14 court costs. That brings us kind of to the next handout. But I think before we go there, let's look at pretrial diversion and deferral programs. These are programs through the prosecuting attorney's office. Your prosecuting attorney may or may not use these programs, but if they do, they are a way to defer or work your way around prosecution for either a misdemeanor or an infraction case. Misdemeanors are in the pretrial diversion. Infractions are the deferral program, but the agreements that the prosecutor enters into with these people to defer the prosecution may look very similar. Many prosecuting attorneys think that they're one program. They're not. Under the statute, they're different programs. And the fees are a little different. The fee structure is a little different. I'm extremely familiar with the deferral program. Been on it a couple of times in a couple of different counties. Thank goodness it was pre-Odyssey, so the counties didn't talk to each other. But, so if you get a speeding ticket, which is an infraction, and you don't want the points on your license or your insurance company to find out, and you decide that you think you can be good for however long the prosecutor determines. It might be a 6-month program, it might be a year-long program. You decide you want to pay the fees and apply for that program instead of going through the court and just pleading guilty and paying your fine, then you can use the deferral program. And what will happen is the prosecuting attorney's office will enter into an agreement with me, since I was speeding. And so I'll sign the agreement that I'm going to be good. I will pay the fees to you. You will collect those fees, and you'll have a copy of the agreement so that you know what to collect, because some prosecutors will say it's a 6-month program and there's a monthly fee in there. So the fee is $10 per month, and we've used like a 6-month example here, and you can see that in the footnotes. But it might be a 3-month program, it might be a year-long program, so that affects how much the bottom line of those fees are. But do make sure that you get those agreements, signed agreements from the prosecuting attorney's office if you have these programs. There can also be a city attorney can do a deferral program as well. And so you may have a city program that you're dealing with as well, but the prosecuting attorney at the county should be bringing you those agreements, even if the cities, they're working with the city on that program. Then the last page of this handout talks about seatbelt violations and child restraint system violations. They all seem the same to us, just as drivers, but they are not the same because the fees don't go to the same place. They're both Class D infractions, and so the judgment is $25, and it's limited to that dollar amount. You don't get court costs and all the other things on top of it. But the $25 for the seatbelt violations goes to a different place than where the $25 for the child restraint system violations goes. So you have to keep track of those separately within your system. And the case types, the codes for the case types are going to help you to do that. So just so once again, important to get the case types right. Okay. Let's talk a little bit about those line numbers. And this is where it's going to get real confusing. So you've seen a good portion of the fees that you collect for the various types of cases, but there's a lot of other things that you do that involve a fee that aren't necessarily cases. And so when you get over onto the handout that says Clerk of the Circuit Court Distribution of Costs and Fees, and it has all the lines on it, this is a listing of all the costs and fees we can think of. And this is what tells you not what to collect. This is what you collect. This is where it all goes, okay? So we can trace from this sheet to this sheet, but unfortunately the line numbers got left off. So I'm going to help you to know how to put the line numbers into this handout here with the lines on it, okay? There's a little box over here on the left-hand side that was left blank. I apologize for that. But if you start at the top, you'll see administrative fee for bonds and administrative fee for overpayments. They're both administrative fees. So that's those two together are line number 1. After that, if you just number 2 through 32 on that page straight down, it's not that part's fine. Okay, I apologize. This is a bit tedious, but hopefully it's worth it then. All right, when we get to the back of the page, once again, the first two lines are both late payment fees. There's different conditions on how your county has handled it, but they're both line 33. And then from the late surrender fees is 34, and you go on down the page, and I think you end up with 52. All right, so let's go back to the front page then of this handout. After you put the line numbers in the far left column, you also then have the name of the fee that's collected. Then you have a column that says percentage goes to the county. You have a column that says percentage that goes to the state and percentage to cities and towns. And then the last column is your Indiana code reference. Now, this code reference may be different than the code reference you see on the fees by case type, because this code reference on the fees by case type is the authority for collecting the fee and the amount of the fee, details. The code reference on the distribution handout are the code references that tell you where the money goes, and it's not always in the same code. So I just wanted to let you know that those can be different. And it depends what you're looking for. Sometimes an attorney will be demanding that you don't have the right to collect a certain dollar amount and they don't believe you. Well, if that's the case, you need the collection authority, the authority to collect it, and that code reference. The only time you need the distribution code reference is to make sure that you're getting the money where it needs to go. Now, if we just look at the first line, is a very easy, simple example. Administrative fee on bonds. So if you you have a bail bond that comes in, you can collect an administrative fee. It goes 100% to the county, and then you'll see a little number 1 in parentheses next to the 100%. That number 1 equates to the last page of this handout, which is the legend. That tells you what fund the monies go into. And number 1 is Fund 1000, which is the county's general fund. So that's how this sheet works. Let's talk about a little more complicated example. Let's go down to line number 14, the court costs we talked about. That was on each of the case types. Court costs goes 27% to the county, and it goes once again to fund number 1, so that's the county general fund. 70% of the court costs goes to fund number 11 at the state. But you can see in the legend, 11 says state share of court costs and deferred prosecution fees. And you can see that it belongs on your state report. That's what's in parentheses on the legend. So that means you're going to include that on your report when you remit it to the state treasurer's office, okay? And you'll learn about those reports in a little bit. And then the final 3%, if you go back to the first page, goes to number 15 to cities and towns, and that has a fund number, 1116, for city and town court costs fund at the county auditor's office. So you know you've got to get it to the county auditor, and they distribute it to the cities and towns. Okay. Yes?
So the 27 and the 3 go to the auditor every month, but the 70 are both, is that right?
That is correct. Did you hear her? Okay. Let's talk a little bit more about some of the things and where you're going to deposit them. In some of the columns where it says the percentage to the state, there's a little asterisk For example, like the child restraint system violation fine on line 9 says it goes 100% to the state, fund number 28, and it has an asterisk by it. That asterisk, if you look down below, means that these are state fees that are sent to the county auditor for them to forward to the auditor state. And it all depends how the law was written as to how these funds flow. There are some you remit directly, like the court costs, the 70%. You do a semi-annual report and a check to the state treasurer and auditor's office. And then there are some that have the asterisks that you send to the county auditor. One of the reasons for this is that the county auditors are probably collecting these same types of fees from city and town courts. So they are the repository before it comes to the state for some of these fees. But it's not necessarily logical. It's just how the statute was written. So we're trying to comply with the statute. There's rules for everything. We don't make up the answers. There's always a rule or a statute that tells us what to do. So for those with the asterisks, you're going to put those on a monthly deposit slip, which we call a report of collections. Your system may create that, and that's what goes to the auditor with the check that's for the treasurer. And that form, that report of collections, deposit slip type thing, will tell the auditor what funds to post the money to while the check goes to the treasurer's office. So that monthly report of collections will include all of the things that are state fees in the state column that have an asterisk. And then you will also be remitting monthly to the county auditor all of the things that are to go to the county, the percentages to the county, and for the ones that are in that city and town column. So once again, you're probably going to go back and hug your bookkeepers after this. But do at least familiarize yourself with this a little bit. You don't have to do it first thing when you get in office. If you've got a bookkeeper who's there, you've got a system that's there, this will probably not be the first thing you do when you get in office. But at some point, you will want to check this and make sure that things have been, when new fees have come into existence or changes have been made, they've been made properly within your system so that things are being directed the right place. And let me assure you, from looking at the remittance reports, that the 6-month reports that are sent in to the state auditor's office with the collections, there are a lot of counties that are not doing it right. And we have been working and working and working to get consistency, first of all, by saying, here's the amount you charge for each case type, and working with Jeff's group to make sure we've got the case types right. But over the years, I mean, it just has gotten out of hand with all these fees. And, you know, the vendor may come in and program the system the first time when they install it, but after that, you guys are doing the maintenance on it most of the time. So if there's a new fee that's added, you've got to add it, and it's got to be added correctly. And it's not. Most of you are going to go home and find at least one example, if you check, where the money's not going the right place. Some of these things, like the highway work zone fees, it's just a dead giveaway. It's always either 50 cents or $2.50. So I should never see like a $111.37 coming into the state auditor's office for that.
So if they come in and they make a partial payment, we're on audit.
Yes.
So they make a partial payment and it goes through and then it steps up, would you sometimes see odd amounts like that?
Maybe. Maybe. And what she's talking about is, you know, if somebody offers to give you money and your job is to collect fees, you don't turn it away even if it's not enough. You know, you're going to take it. but you got to find a way to take it. How do you apply those partial payments? Well, on criminal cases, there's a law that tells us how to apply those, what order we apply those. But for everything else, there's not an order. So if it's not a criminal case type, you are going to look first to your judge to see if there's a local court rule on how you apply those partial payments. And if your judges haven't made a court ruling, you will probably want to have an office policy as to how you apply those partial payments. And if it is in Odyssey that your rule has been that you divide it up, a specific way, and it's been programmed that way, if you're not going to have the same rule going forward as the last clerk did, you just are going to have to, change your programming. You're allowed to change that rule. It's a rule of your office. If you want the judges to change their court rule, you have to talk with them. Some of the judges are really inconsistent with the other judges that you'll be working with. If you want them to kind of unify in some of these matters where people are treated the same no matter which court they end up in, then you may have to work with the judges to get that changed to be more uniform. Or you just have to deal with different rules. And that can be a nightmare for your staff. So try to just keep that in mind because it's confusing enough. We don't need any help to make it more confusing. It really is. Well, if there's not any other questions, we have, yes.
If you don't have a city and town court, you still have to lose 3% of your fees.
Yes, it doesn't go to the court specifically, the 3% of the court costs. It goes to the cities and towns that have law enforcement. So if they have a town marshal, if you have a city that has a police department, they end up having, there's a formula that the county auditor has to use to see.
Would it be possible, because we collect it as 70 and 30%. Could they be splitting up the 30% when they get it?
Yes, they will be.
Okay.
Yes, the auditor could be splitting off that 30%. Most likely you'll work with the auditor on the funds numbers. Like I tried to give you the fund numbers on that last page of the legend for the county funds that they have. And they should have a separate fund for this because the state share the court costs and the city and town court costs should go into different funds. And so they really shouldn't, somebody has to be splitting them. Normally on the report of collections, you will put only the 3% into the Fund 1116. And that is a more recent occurrence because we forced counties to have a uniform chart of accounts where their fund numbers are more consistent. Yes, but you'll work with your auditors on those reports of collections to make sure that your fund numbers are what they should be and what the auditor is using. Some of them will still convert from their old legacy fund numbers into the new fund numbers for when they have to do financial statements. So that's so if they're doing that, it may look the same to you, but on their side they're converting it. Others have asked you to change, so you'll just have to find out from them. I believe that brings us to lunchtime. Yes. Some of your officers